Caitlin, what's the reality of what's happening to migrants under Title 42?
So Title 42 is this 1920s law that President Trump invoked in order to seal the border in a way that was more dramatic than any other change he made under his administration. It basically limits the ability of almost anybody who's trying to seek asylum in the United States or come in through an irregular way from entering. And not only that, but they are put through an expedited court proceeding where they don't have opportunities they would otherwise have to go before a judge to plead their case and to request to enter the country. So originally, this policy applied to all migrants trying to cross the border, and President Biden has since changed that, and he's allowing in unaccompanied minors exclusively. They're not being expelled under Title 42. Everybody else is. And one thing that I think is important for your viewers to know is that right now there's so much talk in the country about the large number of unaccompanied minors crossing the border. What I'm hearing from advocates who work in those areas is that families are actually coming to the United States border together. But because of the way this order exists in place now, they're letting their children cross the border alone, knowing that if they came as a family and presented themselves, they wouldn't get in. And so it's actually, these advocates argue, contributing to the large number of unaccompanied minors who are overwhelming facilities like the ones that you're showing right now.
Jess, are you hearing what Caitlin is hearing, and where then does that leave the Biden administration?
I'm absolutely hearing what Caitlin is hearing. I would completely agree, count myself among those advocates saying that Title 42 is contributing to the challenges we have with unaccompanied minors at the border. And, I would say that the Biden administration has done a lot of awesome things on immigration. And it is a little bit perplexing why they continue to keep Title 42, given that we know it is starting to contribute to one of their biggest challenges. We have been advocating at Families Belong Together to end Title 42 immediately, particularly because it has a disproportionate impact on Haitian migrants who have been very hurt by Title 42 and we're very worried about. We think that the Biden administration has everything they need to be able to stop this right now, including the fact that the CDC and others, the other public health experts have written to the CDC and others to make sure that they know that this has no public health basis. So anyone who's saying that Title 42 is about public health is absolutely wrong.
Caitlin, in March, there were over 18,000 unaccompanied migrant children crossing the border. That is a record number. There were struggles to house them. That, of course, is one of the bigger issues here. In your latest for The Atlantic, you write in part that the issue is not that the federal government is unable to handle the large numbers of children crossing the border. It's been unwilling to spend the money required because of a concern about optics. Tell us more about what you heard on that front, Caitlin.
Sure. So one of the things I wanted to do in my most recent story was just point out for people who might be for the first time now hearing about these large numbers of children crossing the border alone, and they might be very surprised because it certainly sounds like an overwhelming number, and it is, as you point out, breaking some records. However, I've been covering immigration since the Obama administration, and this is not by any stretch the first surge of unaccompanied minors that we've had, and we don't have more children in federal custody than we've ever had before. And so I wanted to point out that in these prior surges I've covered, 2012 is when one began. In 2014, it peaked. We had another in 2016, another in 2019. Each time I've sat down with administration officials and said, and they have lamented to me the fact that their facilities are completely overwhelmed, that they're having to abandon their regular work as law enforcement officers and turn their offices into playrooms for kids and buy crackers rather than doing, the work that they're trained to do. And so I've asked, well, why is it that this is still the case? When we've had this many surges, how are we still unprepared as a country to deal with them? The answer I've gotten is that there's a feeling that if we were to build very large facilities that were, fitted specifically for children, that would send a message of welcoming and encouraging more migration. There's a lot of questions and problems with that type of theory. It's basically a deterrence ideology that's been disproven a number of times, but it's one that continues to hold the United States back from investing in a way that would prevent, again, the conditions that we're all looking at right now.
Right. And Jess, where does that then leave advocates like yourself?
We've been calling for the end of not only family separation, but also family detentions and detentions of minors ever since Families Belong Together started, following many years of advocates who have been calling for this. We believe deeply that it is possible to welcome people with dignity and respect, and that in fact, that would actually solve a lot of our immigration problems. I think that people think that immigration is an intractable policy issue, and I just don't agree. I think that immigration is absolutely solvable. It is necessary for us to solve it, and that we can create a fair, humane, and functional immigration system if we abandon this idea that people need to be detoured. That's not how migrants make decisions about whether or not to come to the United States. If you think about it, in fact, the fact that they're coming at all is really everything we need to know. The only reason that you would move and pack up and travel thousands of miles and leave your home and your family and all of your belongings is because the alternative is no alternative. So we need to think about why people come here, what are the factors in their home countries, and how we can make sure that we welcome every single migrant with dignity and respect, no matter what.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.